Hey, welcome back to Nocturne Library, or welcome in if you're here for the first time. I'm Ava Calloway, and thank you for making this little corner of the night part of your routine when you're ready to wind down and let yourself fall asleep. Tonight's sleep story, written by Nora Fielding, takes you aboard a private overnight jet to Paris. And if your mind's been busy today, you're in exactly the right place. This is the kind of journey where everything narrows down to comfort. A blanket drawn just right, the gentle motion of the flight, the quiet anticipation of waking somewhere beautiful, while the rest of the world feels very far away. And if you enjoy these nightly stories, a like or subscribe always helps the channel keep making more of them. So let your shoulders drop a little, unclench your jaw, take one slow, easy breath in and out. Now, let's drift into tonight's story. Chapter 1. The warm towel and the first quiet moments on the jet. The towel is placed into your hands while it is still warm, and your fingers close around it, almost before you think to. Damp warmth spreads across your palms, into the pads of your thumbs, between your fingers. The scent rises at once. Bergamot first, bright and rounded, then white tea beneath it, pale and clean. Around you, the jet is already in its nighttime hush. The engines are a low, steady hum behind you. Ahead, there will be stars above the Atlantic. For now, though, there is only the towel cooling by degrees in your hands. You sit back into the seat and let the warmth rest there a moment longer. The fabric is folded with exactness, edges aligned, but the heat has softened it into something more yielding, and you press it once lightly between your palms, as if to gather the last of it. Here, that habit begins to loosen almost at once. The seat receives your weight. The towel gives off its last bright heat. Nothing is asked aloud. No one leans into your space. Care has already taken place and withdrawn again, leaving only its result. The cabin is not dark yet, but it has entered that earlier stage of evening when surfaces stop reflecting so sharply. The light is warm on the armrest, warm on the polished trim, warm on the curve of the window frame beside you. The air carries a coolness touched by recirculated freshness, and beneath it all is the steady rear fuselage hush, constant enough that after a few breaths, you stop hearing separate layers in it. The engine noise and airflow blend into a steady background, as natural for the next hours as rain on a roof might be elsewhere. The towel leaves a trace of moisture on your skin. You turn it once in your hands and bring it near your face, not quite to breathe it in more deeply, only close enough that the bergamot lifts again. It is a restrained fragrance, not sweet, not floral, only clean and faintly citrus, with white tea beneath it. The heat is already lessening. You can feel the difference from one side of the folded cloth to the other. The outer layer cooling first, while the center still keeps a little hidden warmth. You are aboard. The crossing has begun. The thought arrives without ceremony, and because it is so simple, your body believes it before your mind needs to examine it. The shoulders lower a fraction against the seat. Your jaw unclenches. One foot shifts, not from impatience, but from the first instinct toward comfort. There will be no more corridors, no more bright thresholds, no more checking and rechecking where something belongs. The route is already decided, measured in invisible miles over black water. The route is set. You can stop thinking about it. Outside the oval window, the night is still mostly a suggestion from this angle. The shade is open enough for a narrow view, and beyond the glass, there is no city pattern, no ribbon of road, no ground to interpret. Only darkness below, with no ground visible, and above it, a few clear stars. They do not glitter in the hurried way stars can from land, interrupted by branches or roofs or movement at the edge of sight. Here they are steadier, set against a clean, high sky. Later, perhaps, there will be more of them, and perhaps the faint dusting of the Milky Way, if you happen to look at the right moment. But you do not need the sky to do anything for you now. It is enough that it is there. You rest the towel across your palms and feel the remaining warmth sink away. The seat gives under your weight, neither too firm nor too yielding, and the support beneath your back is so exact that you notice it only because there is nothing to correct. In another setting, you might still be half upright in yourself, carrying the shape of the day as if it had to be preserved a little longer. Here, the shape begins to change. Your spine settles. Your head leans back. Even your hands, occupied by this folded square of heat and fragrance, seem less like tools and more like parts of you returning to stillness. A muted click sounds from somewhere farther forward in the cabin. Not an interruption, only the kind of tiny completion that tells you something has been adjusted into place. Then, the hush resumes in full. You smooth one thumb over the towel's edge. The weave is fine, almost silky when damp, with just enough texture to catch against the skin. Its warmth now is gentler, no longer bright. The comparison passes through your mind and goes no further. And with that drift comes the first image of Paris. Not the city in full, not boulevards or monuments or any grand arrival. Only a hotel room on the left bank, shutters opening inward and then out. The familiar wooden movement, the hinges giving a small, practical sound. Pale stone across the street catches the first light before the sky has fully brightened. The room behind you is still cool from night, as if it has kept your place. Somewhere below, not yet close enough to disturb anything, a delivery van passes with that low diesel murmur particular to early streets before voices rise around it. Then the image thins. It does not need to become a plan. It has done enough simply by appearing. The towel in your hands is cooler now, and you return to it without effort. The engines keep the same even note. You can sense the motion of the jet, not as speed, but as steadiness. Forward movement is happening somewhere beyond your skin, beyond the cabin wall, beyond the dark oval of the window. Inside, nothing rushes. A small current of conditioned air touches the side of your wrist where the towel no longer covers it. The contrast between cool skin and fading heat is precise and oddly satisfying. You turn your hands palm up and lay the cloth across them. The bergamot has softened too. What remains now is more tea than citrus. It is a pleasant thing to notice how quickly comfort can begin with something so brief. Not because the towel itself is important, but because it marks the change so clearly. Before this, you were still arriving. Now you've arrived. The cabin gives another degree toward evening. You sense it before you fully identify it. Light easing down, edges less distinct, reflections on the trim growing dimmer. The transition is gradual enough that your eyes do not need to adjust all at once. Gold deepens toward amber. The change touches your hands, the towel, the line of your sleeve. It reaches the window frame and leaves less shine there than before. You think, without needing to pursue the thought, of the bed that will be made flat later. Ivory beneath you, a charcoal throw drawn within reach. The unusual simplicity of lying fully horizontal while the aircraft continues west to east above the Atlantic dark. Even that image remains close to the body rather than becoming an event. Not something to look forward to with impatience, only another layer of ease already prepared somewhere nearby. The towel cools further. Your fingers loosen around it. For a moment, you notice the faintest movement in the cabin fabric, a nearly imperceptible settling from somewhere behind your shoulder. Perhaps upholstery adjusting after a shift in pressure. Perhaps linen being placed elsewhere with practiced care. You do not turn toward it. The service here is most visible by what has already been completed and left ready. That, too, helps the mind release its outward attention. There is nothing to monitor. Again, Paris comes, but only in a fragment. This time, it is the paper sleeve around a still warm croissant, the way it crackles once under your fingers before softening where butter heat meets the inside of the paper. Then coffee, dark, fragrant, not yet tasted. The image is so brief, it is almost only scent. It fades before you can do anything with it, and the fading is pleasant. You do not need to keep hold of it. Morning can remain where it is, on the far side of sleep. Your palms are now only faintly warm. You bring the towel once more against the base of your fingers, collecting that last remnant of heat. It has become delicate enough that you could miss it if you hurried. But there is no reason to hurry. The cloth is cooler at the corners, warmer at the folded center. Your skin has taken on its scent. If you separated your hands now and held them near your face, bergamot and white tea would still be there, reduced to the lightest trace. The engine note continues, low and even. Somewhere beyond the glass, the Atlantic passes beneath you unseen. Above it, the stars remain fixed in their cold clarity, while inside the cabin, the amber light settles lower. You feel the seat beneath you, the support at your back, the towel nearly cooled in your hands, and the first true sense that you can rest. When at last the warmth leaves your palms almost completely, you notice that nothing is lost with it. The heat goes, but the ease it started remains, and your hands rest open for a moment in the dimming cabin. Still faintly scented, one foot shifts again inside its shoe, seeking the next small comfort. The jet moves on through the dark. Chapter 2. Changing into flight socks and letting the day fall away. After a little while, your attention shifts to your feet. Your shoes are still on, still carrying the memory of corridors and polished floors, and walking through terminals and corridors. You can feel the shape of them around your feet more distinctly than you did a few minutes ago. What had been ordinary while moving through the day has become noticeable in stillness. The pressure over the instep, the firmness at the heel, the small restraint across the toes. The cabin has settled another degree. The engine note remains where it has been all along, deep and even behind you, more like a continuous fabric of sound than a machine. Above it comes the faint circulation of cooled air, and below that, almost too slight to name, the occasional shift of upholstery as you change your weight by an inch or two. Nothing needs your attention for long. Beside you on the ledge, a water glass has already been placed within reach. The glass catches the cabin light. Beneath it, the linen coaster sits square and exact. The small silver wing pressed into one corner, visible only when the light touches it at the right angle. The arrangement tells you what you need to know. Water for later. Space cleared. The line of the berth prepared beyond your shoulder. Not yet occupied, but already made ready for that next stage of the night. You lean forward slightly, and the motion feels smaller than it would have on the ground, absorbed by the thick seat and the steady movement beneath everything. Your fingers find the first shoe almost by habit. There is a brief resistance in the fit. Then the heel slips free. Cool air touches the newly bared skin at once, intimate and precise, and the sensation is vivid enough to stop you there for a beat. The shoe half lifted away. Then the shoe is off. Your socked foot rests on the carpet. The carpet has a dense, muted give beneath it. Not plush exactly, but padded in a way that takes away any hardness. The freed foot seems lighter than its actual weight. And for a moment, you simply let it be there, no longer enclosed. The ankle loosens. The toes spread inside the remaining fabric with a tiny, almost private stretch. The second shoe follows more easily because your body has already understood what is happening. Another small release, another coolness. The day, which had narrowed itself into departures and timings, and the forward lean of getting from one place to another, begins to lose its outline. Somewhere, while your attention was elsewhere, the shoes have already acquired a place to go. You do not need to consider where to set them. A space below and slightly aside receives them without effort. And once they are there, out of sight, the floor in front of you seems unexpectedly open. It is not only the shoes that have disappeared, but the visible evidence of where the day has been. Nothing remains at your feet except room. On the seat beside you, or perhaps folded just where your hand naturally falls, the flight socks are waiting. Heather gray, ribbed, thicker than ordinary socks but not heavy. They have the dry, brushed feel of something chosen specifically for this hour between travel and sleep. You gather one in both hands and feel the elasticity give under your fingers. The knit is soft but structured, with enough body to be reassuring. The soft knit makes the cabin feel less like transit and more like a room. You slide the first sock over your toes. There is a small pleasure in that first contact. The fabric moves over the skin with a faint drag, then settles. Over the ball of the foot, around the arch, over the heel. You tug it higher, and the ribbing aligns itself along the ankle and lower calf. The sock is warm from the cabin, not heated, simply kept from chill by the air and the enclosed space. It fits closely enough that you can feel each part of your foot receive it in turn. And as it smooths into place, the removed shoe is forgotten. The second sock follows with the same measured attention. You are in no hurry. There is nothing to catch up to. The knit gathers in your hands, then lengthens over your foot. And once both are on, you place your feet side by side on the carpet and notice the difference at once. No leather, no fastening, no edge pressing back. Only the mild pressure of the ribbed fabric and the steadier, more even contact beneath. You flex your feet once, then again, a little less. Your calves soften against the seat. The line from your knees down changes. What had been arranged for motion is now arranged for rest. The glass on the ledge catches another low gleam. For a moment, the cut crystal throws a narrow shape of honey-colored light onto the wood trim. Then the angle changes and it disappears. The coaster remains pale in the dimness, neat and flat. Nearby, a carafe has been set where your hand could find it later without searching. You do not reach for it yet. It is enough to know it is there, as exact and unobtrusive as the turned corner of a sheet in a darkened room. You rest back again and let your socked feet settle farther forward. The carpet feels cooler through the thicker knit, but only slightly, enough to be pleasant. Your toes no longer brace inside a shoe. Your arches no longer hold themselves in readiness. It is remarkable how quickly the feet stop expecting to be used. The body notices first, at its furthest points, where contact with the world is usually most direct. Once the feet are relieved of their work, the signal moves upward. Ankles, knees, hips. Your shoulders lower another fraction in answer. Outside the oval window, there is only a dark that does not show its surface. The Atlantic is somewhere beneath you, vast and unseen. The shade remains adjusted to that halfway point that gives you a narrow section of sky and keeps the cabin from becoming all reflection. Through it, 1 or 2 stars hold steady despite the motion, appearing less like points you are approaching than fixed marks in a field through which you are being carried. You look only briefly before your attention returns inward. The socks continue to make themselves known in small ways as the minutes pass. The ribbing at the ankles, the slight loft under the soles, the way the fabric keeps a little pocket of warmth around each foot, while the cabin air remains cool enough to keep the rest of you comfortable. Your feet are no longer dressed for arrival somewhere. They are dressed for sleep. A thought of Paris comes and goes without forming into a plan. Not the city as a whole, only a detail. The crackle of paper around a warm croissant, held carefully because the butter has begun to soften through the layers. Then coffee, darker than the cabin now, lifting steam into pale morning air near an open window. Below, on a narrow street, the low diesel murmur of a delivery van passing stone facades still in shadow. The image is brief. It does not ask to be followed. It simply appears, complete enough to be felt, then recedes. When it goes, your feet are still there in their gray socks, grounded lightly on the carpet. The contrast is pleasing in its own way. Present night known through knit fabric and cooled air and the velvet hum behind you. One does not replace the other. They overlap for a moment, then separate again. You shift one foot over the other and feel the fine friction of sock against sock. A small domestic sound, nearly nothing. It belongs more to a bedroom than to an aircraft. And because of that, it makes the cabin feel oddly domestic. You are crossing the Atlantic. And at the same time, you are simply changing into socks for the night. The cabin light has lowered a little more, enough that edges lose some of their definition. The glass is now mostly shape rather than sparkle. The silver wing on the coaster no longer catches the eye unless you lean toward it. The aisle beyond is dimmer too, though a low line of floor-level glow remains, enough to mark space without brightening it. In this reduced light, objects stop presenting themselves one by one. They become part of a single arrangement around you. Water, ledge, window, seat. The long prepared place where you will soon lie down. You notice, too, that your posture has changed without instruction. Earlier, you were sitting in the way people sit when there might still be one more thing to do. Now, your spine has released some of that alertness. Your head rests more fully. Your hands no longer hold themselves ready in your lap. Even your jaw has gone loose enough that your tongue settles differently behind your teeth. The socks are only socks, and yet the body takes them as a message it understands perfectly. The engine hush continues without variation. Once, from farther forward, there is the faintest sound of something small settling in the galley. A single contact of glass against a secured surface. And then that too is over. The cabin returns at once to its low, continuous nighttime register. Air moves from a vent with a thread-like steadiness. Fabric shifts when you breathe deeper. The rest remains undisturbed. You let your feet slide back a little, and then forward again, testing the freedom of them. The motion is childlike in its simplicity, but there is no self-consciousness in it here. No one is watching. Privacy on a night flight has its own texture. It is made not only of walls and dimmed lights, but of completed care, of being left alone in exactly the right condition. Another Paris fragment arrives, smaller than the first. Shutters opening outward onto pale stone. The first light not yet bright, only enough to silver the edges of the window frame. The air beyond has that early coolness that touches the skin before the room fully wakes. Then the image thins and is gone, and the present returns with the pressure of the seat beneath your thighs and the reassuring lightness of your feet, now free of the day. You do not need to make anything happen from here. The transition has already begun in the smallest practical place possible. At your feet, where effort often remains long after the mind has decided to rest. The shoes are gone from sight. The socks are on. The floor feels open. Your body has started to want less from the world. And in that wanting less, it becomes easier to notice how much has already been provided. The water glass waiting in the darkening amber. The coaster lying square beneath it. The hidden place where your shoes now rest. The prepared stretch of cabin beside you, where the next shape of comfort will unfold. The crossing is underway, whether you think about it or not. Mile after mile of black water passes below unseen. Above it, stars remain beyond the half-lowered shade. Inside, your feet rest in their heather-gray warmth, and the last useful structure of the day loosens. Just beside you, within reach if you turned now, the berth waits in its dim, clean order. The sheet drawn smooth, the pillow set, the blanket folded back enough to suggest the shape your body will soon take there. Chapter 3. The bed made flat with ivory linen and a cashmere throw. The prepared stretch of cabin beside you has already changed shape. What was a divan a little while ago has become something flatter, longer, more exact. In the amber light, you can see the line of it running beside the window and under the ledge. No longer arranged for sitting, but for sleep. The mattress topper lies fitted so neatly that its corners barely show themselves at all. Ivory against the darker cabin around it. Its surface smooth, except for the faint rise where the padding settles over the frame beneath. At the near edge, the charcoal throw has been folded back in a clean turn. You look at it for a moment before moving, not because there is any decision to make, but because the sight of a real bed in the air still has its own small strangeness. You are used to the postures of travel, upright, angled, braced, contained by armrests and timing and the next required step. Even comfort on an airplane usually comes with some compromise, some reminder in the knees or neck that you are resting in a place not built for full surrender. But this is different. This has levelness. This has the unmistakable shape of somewhere you can lie down and disappear from the day. The engine hush continues behind you and around you, not changing, not asking for notice, only present in the way a deep note can be present under everything else. From the rear of the fuselage, it comes, softened by distance and insulation, until it is a continuous hum. If you attend to it, you can hear its steadiness. If you stop attending, it remains anyway, carrying the same note through every thought. You shift closer and place one hand on the ivory surface. The topper gives under your palm with a measured softness, not too much, just enough to receive the weight of your hand and return it evenly. The fabric is cool at first touch. Your fingers move once across the surface, feeling the tautness of the fitted edge, the slight drag of clean cloth against skin. Then you turn and sit. The berth takes your weight without protest. There is no narrow seat edge pressing behind your thighs now, no seam asking to be adjusted around. Instead, there is a broad, level plane under you, stable enough that your body begins to trust it almost before you have finished lowering yourself. Your socked feet rest on the carpet for another moment, heather gray against the darker floor, and then you draw them up, one at a time. It is a small movement, but it changes everything. The hidden shoes, the water glass on its coaster, the warm towel already taken away, the amber light on the sidewall. All of it recedes a fraction. You turn your hips, bring your legs around, and let yourself align with the length of the bed. For a moment, you are half reclined, propped on one hand, testing the dimensions without thinking of it as testing. There is no seat back in front of your knees. Your spine can extend. You lower yourself the rest of the way. Your head comes to the pillow, and the pillow receives it with a cool, compact give. The back of your neck lengthens. One shoulder settles, then the other. Your hips find level support instead of an angled cushion. Your calves release their remaining effort. Even your heels, inside their ribbed socks, seem to understand before the rest of you does that there will be no more standing tonight. It is the straightness of it that feels so luxurious. Your body can lie in one unbroken line while the aircraft continues on through the dark. You feel your own length from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, and there is relief in that recognition, as if some part of you has been waiting all day to be measured against nothing more complicated than a flat bed. Above and beyond the window, the Atlantic night remains where it has been all along, though you are not looking at it now. You know it is there in the same way you know the engines are there. By constancy, by the fact that movement continues, whether or not you turn your mind toward it. Somewhere below is black water with no visible edge. Somewhere ahead, too far to matter tonight, pale stone and shuttered windows, and the first bakery heat of morning will take shape. But that belongs to another hour. For now, what matters is the ivory surface under your shoulder blades, the faint coolness in the sheets, the low rush of air through the cabin. Your hand finds the turned back edge of the throw. Cashmere has a different weight from wool, a finer density, and you feel it at once in the way the fabric gathers. It is light enough to lift with 2 fingers, substantial enough that it falls back into place with a muted, fluid heaviness. The charcoal color is almost lost now in the dim cabin, but your hand can read what your eyes no longer need to. The nap is brushed smooth in one direction and slightly resistant in the other. When you draw it over yourself, it moves without rustle, skimming over your knees, your hips, your middle, then settling across your chest. You pause there, with one hand still on top of it. Under the throw, warmth begins in sections. First across your shins, where the cloth rests close, then at your thighs, then around your waist, where the mattress supports you most fully. The upper edge lies just below your collarbones, and you make one small adjustment, pulling it a little higher, then smoothing it down again. That one movement is enough. There is no need to tug at corners or search for a better arrangement. The blanket was turned down properly. The berth was made to receive exactly this. The jet moves on. You can feel that motion not as bumps or shifts, but as a steady onwardness beneath stillness. A paradox your body accepts more easily when it is horizontal. Seated, you are aware of travel by the need to remain arranged within it. Lying here, you feel something else, that the motion belongs to the aircraft, while your task is simply to rest inside it. Your breathing has already changed. It deepens without instruction. Not dramatically, only enough that the throw rises and falls against your chest in a slower rhythm. The muscles along your ribs stop assisting. Your jaw loosens another degree. One hand rests on the blanket, the other near the pillow, and both seem to have forgotten whatever they were doing earlier in the evening. The sidewall beside you is close enough to make this berth feel like a small room of its own. Not large, but exact. A small, private space arranged around the fact of your resting body. The ledge above your shoulder holds the glass and the carafe, though you do not turn to look. You know where they are. That is enough. The half-lowered shade leaves the upper part of the oval window open, and if you shifted your gaze, you would find a narrow piece of sky there, a dark pane scattered with stars. But even that can wait. The thought of it is enough for now. Cold distance beyond the glass, warmth within. You stretch one leg a little farther, then the other. It is an almost luxurious motion in its simplicity. Your toes point inside the socks, then release. Your knees lengthen and settle lower. The small of your back eases down another fraction into the mattress. A faint pull leaves your hips. You had not realized until this moment how much of the day remained stored there. in the joints and tendons that spend hours preparing for the next turn, the next stand, the next corridor. Lying flat eases some of that. The engine note continues even. Behind it, if you listen more closely, there is the finer sound of air moving over the fuselage, a long, brushed current, and beneath that, the low circulation of the cabin. The linens answer with the slightest shifts when you move, then become still again. These are not separate enough to count as events. They combine into one field of sound that makes no demand on thought. You can drift near it, away from it, back again, and it remains unchanged. A small image of Paris comes and goes, not the city entire, not streets or plans or arrival. Only a shutter opening inward somewhere above pale stone, and then the brighter movement of it opening out. A little rectangle of morning air, a room still cool from the night. The image does not stay long. It does not need to. It touches the edge of your mind and thins again, leaving behind only the sense that another bed, another window, another hour exists beyond this one. The berth beneath you is more convincing than any thought of morning. Its support has become specific now. You can feel where the topper yields under the back of your shoulders and where it stays firmer under your waist. The pillow has warmed slightly under one cheek. The throw has settled into the hollow between your arm and your side. Your feet, no longer constrained by shoes, are free to angle outward in their natural rest. Such small corrections continue for a while after you lie down, your body making them with no need to consult you. A shoulder eases lower. A heel shifts. Your chin tips a fraction until your throat feels open and easy. Then, even those adjustments begin to stop. The amber light still exists, though less of it reaches you now that you are lying down. From here, the ceiling seems farther away. The sidewall sconce gives off a lower glow than before, and the brighter surfaces of the cabin have dulled into tone and outline. The ivory bedding keeps a trace of light longer than the darker upholstery around it, so that for a while, the bed shows pale against the darker cabin. You turn your face slightly toward the window. Through the upper opening above the shade, 1 or 2 stars are visible at first, then more as your eyes adjust. They are very still from this distance, though you know the aircraft is moving quickly beneath them. The glass is cool near your temple, cool enough that you feel the contrast without touching it. Somewhere beyond that narrow frame of sky, the Milky Way may be laid out in its faint dusting, but you do not need the whole sky to feel the scale of the crossing. A small portion is enough. A few points of light over black water are enough. You turn back toward the pillow. Inside again, the berth feels even more defined for having glanced outward. The cabin's boundaries are close, measured, exact. The throw lies over you in a dark plane. The pillow keeps your head level. The engine hush fills the background with its unbroken note. You are resting inside it. Another minute passes, or several. time has begun to lose its edges. The only small happening is the blanket settling more closely as your body becomes stiller beneath it. A fold near your waist eases flat. The edge near your shoulder slips inward by a finger's width. Warmth collects under the cashmere and remains there. You do not need to improve it. That is part of the relief. No button to press, no seat to negotiate, no next instruction. The bed is already made flat. The top sheet is already smooth. The throw has already been turned down. You lie within all of that completed work and feel your thoughts begin to shorten, then space themselves farther apart. Ahead, Paris remains only in fragments too light to disturb you. A paper sleeve giving a faint crackle around a warm croissant. A hotel window opening onto pale stone. Cool parquet in rooms not yet filled with footsteps. Each image arrives with less detail than before, as if the mind has learned it does not need to rehearse anything. Morning can assemble itself later. For now, the crossing is enough. And here, enough is simple. The ivory surface under you, the charcoal weight above you, the even rear fuselage hush carrying on through the dark. Chapter 4. Watching the cabin lights dim from gold to amber to near dark. Then the first stage begins, so gradually that you notice the lights dimming. The ceiling light thins a little. The warm gold overhead draws inward, no longer reaching as far into the corners. The polished trim loses its brighter line. The berth remains clear, but its edges soften. Your hand on the sheet is still visible, though less distinctly now. Your knuckles no longer outlined with the same precision. In this gold, awareness sharpens rather than fades. You notice the grain of the side ledge, the seam along the berth, the pale edge of the sheet where it meets your wrist. The oval window beside you is dimmer than the cabin. The shade lowered halfway so that a narrow band of night remains visible above the dark lower half of the glass. You can see only a portion of the sky, and that portion is enough. On the ledge, the water glass catches this change before anything else does. A moment ago, its cut sides held several planes of light. Now there are fewer. One facet still glows. Another has gone colorless. Another disappears into the dimness and returns only when you move your eyes back to it. The linen coaster beneath it, with its small silver wing pressed into the fabric, is almost the same tone as the ledge now, visible more by shape than by contrast. The carafe beside it keeps a dull, cool gleam at the shoulder. You settle a little deeper, not by intention, but by response. The mattress topper gives under the longer weight of you. The back of your neck finds a truer line. Your socked feet, inside their ribbed gray warmth, slide half an inch farther under the throw. The coolness that first lived in the sheets has nearly gone, replaced by that neutral temperature that feels less like warmth than like agreement. You become aware of your breathing because the light is changing. And then you stop being especially aware of it because the rhythm has already found itself. A sidewall sconce dims next, and then the one opposite it follows. Their light does not vanish all at once. It lowers to ember, the color deepening as the intensity recedes, until the cabin seems lit less by fixtures than by the memory of them. Amber changes the feeling of the room. The aisle takes on more importance now. Along the floor, a narrow line of low illumination remains, close to the carpet, enough to mark the passage without brightening it. From the berth, you see it only in part, a muted strip below the ledge and beyond the foot of the bed. The half-lowered shade makes the outside darker by contrast, and then, a moment later, clearer. Once your eyes adjust, one star appears, then another. They do not shine sharply through the glass, so much as remain there, fixed beyond it while you move. The Atlantic below is invisible, only a breadth of blackness under the narrower black of sky. But you know it is there, in the same way you know the berth is beneath you without looking. Above that unseen water, this small framed portion of night is enough to suggest the larger expanse around it. Your attention drifts back inside. The reading light above the berth has remained on at its lowest setting. A small private pool, too focused now for the deepening room. You notice it because its circle has grown more distinct as the rest of the cabin has dimmed. A muted click, and the reading light goes out. No hand enters your field of view. No voice marks the change. The cabin is one shade darker, and somehow, one shade quieter too, as if brightness had carried its own faint sound all along. Your shoulders release another small measure. The muscles around your eyes stop expecting to focus on anything. Even your hands, which have continued to make tiny adjustments against the sheet and throw, become still. The low aisle glow remains. Everything above it has receded into gradations of amber and charcoal and shadowed ivory. The berth no longer reads to you as converted furniture or cabin arrangement. It has become simply the place where you are lying, level and enclosed, with the sidewall at one shoulder and the open dark of the aisle beyond your feet. The unusualness of a bed in the air is still there, but farther away now, softened by repetition. You have been horizontal long enough for your body to trust it. The crystal rim of the water glass keeps a thread of light. The fold at the top of the throw makes a dark ridge over your shin. The fitted sheet is smooth under your palm, except for one slight, cool crease near the edge, which disappears when you flatten your hand over it. The cabin air moves lightly across your forehead and the bridge of your nose, cooler there than under the throw. And then, even that distinction begins to blur. You think, for a moment, of another kind of light, pale and early, passing between shutters in a hotel room on the left bank. Not the whole room, not an arrival, not luggage or streets, names spoken aloud. Just the first thin opening, one shutter and then the other, and a rectangle of morning finding the bedspread and the floorboards near the window. Pale stone across the street, a sill cool under the hand. Then it dissolves, leaving behind only the idea of light arriving from outside. Back in the cabin, the present light continues to recede by fractions. The ceiling wash is almost gone now. The side sconces are reduced to their last ember tone, enough to tint the sidewall, but not enough to define it fully. The aisle glow remains the clearest line in the room, and because it is near the floor, everything else seems to rise above it in layers of dimness. Your own knees under the throw are only a suggestion. The ledge beside you is there because the glass rests on it, because the carafe catches one last point of glow, because your hand could reach and find them without searching. You do not need to test that. It is enough to know they are there. If you wake later, there will be water. If you open your eyes, there will be this low line of light, and beyond the shade, some portion of sky. If you remain as you are, the engines will continue with the same velvety note, and the air will continue its faint circulation over linen and skin. In near darkness, the engine sound seems fuller. You hear the soft rush over the fuselage more clearly now, a high, constant texture laid over the deeper rearward hush. Somewhere in the cabin fabric, a nearly imperceptible settling answers when you shift one shoulder. Then all is still again. The aircraft moves with such steadiness that motion reaches you mostly through sound and through the strange comfort of knowing that miles continue to pass beneath you, whether or not you think of them. Your eyes return once more to the window. The half shade gives the night a frame, and the frame makes it easier to look without effort. One star seems brighter now, perhaps because your pupils have widened, perhaps because the cabin has darkened enough for it to come forward. A faint dusting farther beyond might be more stars gathered close together, or the beginning of that milky shimmer you sometimes glimpse at altitude when the sky is especially clear. You do not need to decide. The berth beneath you feels more level as your body stops measuring it. The novelty of lying flat in flight has thinned. Your spine lengthens into the topper. Your ankles rest apart by their own choosing. Your jaw loosens enough that the inside of your mouth changes shape. These are tiny changes, but they arrive with the same patient sequence as the lights. Another Paris fragment brushes past, no larger than scent. Coffee, dark and warm, rising into cool morning air. The dry crackle of a paper sleeve around a croissant, still warm from the oven. Then that, too, fades before it becomes a scene. The crystal glass on the ledge returns to your notice with its dim rim of amber. The aisle glow remains. The sidewall has become almost entirely tone rather than form. At last, even the ember light from the sconces lowers to nearly nothing. The cabin is not dark in the absolute sense. It is shaped by restraint. the line along the floor, the thin reflected edge on crystal, the dim sky through the upper half of the window. This is enough to orient you, and not enough to keep you alert. The eyes can remain open in it without taking on much work. They can close without losing anything important. Nothing more is asked of you, and nothing more can be seen that needs seeing. You let them close for a moment, then open again. The room returns in the same reduced arrangement, unchanged, dependable in its dimness. The click that ended the reading light feels farther away now, though it happened only moments ago. Time has begun to spread out, not in long measured intervals, but in a looser way, where each small perception has more space around it. The gold of earlier light is already hard to recall with precision. What remains is this lower register of amber and near black. The berth under you, the throw over you, the engines carrying on, and because the cabin has completed its dimming, your own attention follows. You stop surveying the room. You stop comparing one stage of light to the next. The water glass, the shade, the line at the floor, the stars beyond the glass. Each can still be found if you turn toward it, but none of them insists. Your mind begins to move in shorter arcs. The dark above the Atlantic, then back again to the simple fact of lying here, fully horizontal, while the last visible light in the cabin stays low to the floor, and the stars beyond the window wait just above it, the final threshold before sleep. Chapter 5. The oval window, the Atlantic night, and the stars above. The wing, with the cabin reduced to its last few traces of light. The dark beyond the glass has become one of the few remaining shapes in the room. The shade rests halfway, exactly where it was left, so that the oval is divided into two calm parts. The upper portion open to the night, the lower portion muted by the pale curve of the shade. It frames only a narrow section of sky, and that narrowness is part of the comfort. You do not have to take in the whole crossing at once. A small portion is enough. You lie on the ivory topper, one shoulder a little deeper than before, the sheet no longer cool against your legs, the charcoal throw drawn lightly over you. Beneath the throw, your feet in their ribbed gray socks have gone fully still. The berth has taken your shape. The mattress gives where it should, supports where it should, and the long, unfamiliar fact of lying flat in an aircraft now feels less unusual than it did even a short while ago. It has become, for these hours, simply your bed. At floor level, the aisle glow remains as a low amber line, barely bright enough to define the edge of the ledge and the lower corner of the cabinetry. Above that, the cabin has almost disappeared. The sidewall, the contours of the seat opposite, all of it has receded into gradations of near dark. What stays clear is the berth beneath you, the faint coolness at the window, and the black-blue field beyond the glass. Below the aircraft is the Atlantic, though there is nothing to see of it. No reflected moonlight, no coast, no vessel crossing. Only the understanding of depth, of distance under you, of miles of dark water spread out in every direction and hidden completely by night. You do not picture waves in detail. You do not need to. You can't see the ocean, only the darkness below. That contrast settles into you without effort. Inside, fitted linen, cashmere, the muted support beneath your back, the tempered air moving almost imperceptibly across your face. Outside, altitude, stars, the long black Atlantic. The vastness beyond the window does not make the berth feel smaller. If anything, the little room of your bed becomes more exact because of it. The edge of the sheet at your waist, the slight loft of the topper beneath your shoulder blades, the place where the throw rests more heavily over your shins. Each detail grows clearer when set against so much that cannot be measured from here. The engine note continues from the rear of the fuselage in its same even register. A sound broad enough that you stop hearing it as a single source. It has no urgency in it. It does not rise or fall in any way that asks to be tracked. It simply remains. And because it remains, your mind can rest against it, the way your head rests against the pillow. Alongside it comes the faint skim of air over the aircraft skin, a thinner sound, and beneath both of them, the low circulation of cabin air. Together, they form a steady background. You turn your eyes back to the window. The stars are clearer now that the cabin has dimmed. Not brighter exactly, but more numerous. A few appear first as fixed points, then more begin to separate themselves from the dark around them. What looked empty a minute ago reveals a grain, then a pattern, then a wider scatter. It is enough to see them suspended beyond the oval frame, steady in the thin, cold atmosphere above the ocean. At times, farther out, a pale concentration of light gathers almost invisibly. Not a cloud, and not a single star, but a faint, sifted brightness stretched across part of the sky. The Milky Way, or some portion of it, appears less as an object than as a texture in the darkness. A powdered band that seems to thicken and then thin as your gaze relaxes. If you look directly for too long, it fades. If you let your eyes rest more loosely, it returns. So you stop trying to hold it in place. You let it come and go. The half-lowered shade limits the view. The lower edge of it cuts off what would otherwise be too much black, too much depth below, and leaves you with sky instead. You are aware of the ocean beneath, but the window offers stars first. This, too, feels like part of the night's preparation. One more completed gesture from the attendant who needed no words to make the berth ready. The blanket edge turned down, the water placed within reach. The shade left halfway. You shift only slightly, enough to feel the topper adjust under your hips, and the pillow settle more evenly under your neck. The movement is so minor that the throw barely changes, only drawing a little closer at one side. Then stillness returns. From here, with your body supported along its full length, motion is something you infer rather than feel. You know the jet is crossing the ocean because of the sound, because of the stars in the window, because Paris lies somewhere ahead beyond the dark. But in your muscles, there is almost no demand to account for movement. You are horizontal and carried. The fact remains pleasantly strange. For a little while, your attention widens. The stars continue to hold their places. Somewhere beyond the frame of the window, there may be more of the sky than you can see, more of the long night over the ocean. But the portion given to you is enough. A few bright points, the dark between them, that faint white sift of the Milky Way appearing and thinning again. You find that the mind grows calmer when the view is partial. There is less to arrange, less to follow. Your breathing settles into the same pace as the cabin sounds, not matched exactly, but companionable with them. Inhale, and you notice the coolness near the window. Exhale, and the sheet at your chest shifts by the smallest amount. Inhale, and the stars remain where they are. Exhale, and the engine hush extends beneath everything else like a level floor. Then, as has happened before tonight, Paris touches the edge of your thoughts without fully arriving. Not the city entire, not streets or plans or any sequence you need to keep. Only a brief image of pale stone outside a hotel window on the left bank. Light not yet bright. Shutters just opened outward. The air there is cooler than the cabin air, touched with morning. The image comes with such little effort that it feels less like imagining and more like noticing something already near. Then it thins. The stars beyond the window return. The black Atlantic remains beneath them, unseen and immense. You do not stay in Paris long. The Berth draws you back by simple physical fact. The ivory surface under your back has warmed where you have been lying. The throw has a denser weight over your knees than over your ankles. One hand rests near your side, the other higher on the sheet, and both have become heavy in the comfortable way that comes before sleep. The cabin gives you almost nothing to manage. The water is there if you want it. The aisle glow stays low. The rest of the room has fallen away. Outside, one star near the edge of the frame slips from view as your gaze changes angle, and another takes its place higher up. It is not an event, only the ordinary result of your head settling a fraction deeper into the pillow. Still, the change is enough to remind you that you are moving through the night, not merely observing it. The sky beyond the window is not fixed around you. You are passing beneath it, mile after mile, while the ocean remains invisible below. Perhaps because the berth is so specifically made, the fitted topper lies smooth under the sheet, with no bunching beneath your shoulder or lower back. The cashmere throw leaves a slight, dry warmth on your shins. The pillow supports the hollow behind your head without forcing your chin forward. However wide the Atlantic may be, your immediate world is still made of linen, wool, dim amber, glass, and the steady pressure of mattress beneath bone and muscle. A faint seam of light along the floor catches the underside of the ledge for a moment, then seems dimmer again, though perhaps your eyes are only adjusting further. The crystal glass on its coaster is somewhere nearby in that darkness, no longer gleaming as it did before, but still within reach. You do not turn toward it. You only remember its place. That knowledge is enough. The carafe is there as well. Nothing has been forgotten. The night has been arranged down to details you may never use. You look out once more, and the sky appears deeper now, less like a surface, and more like distance layered upon distance. The stars are not crowded. They are spaced with enough dark between them that each one can remain distinct. Farther across, that milky scatter appears again, so faint that it nearly disappears into the black before your eyes can decide it is there. You let them remain unresolved. A sleepier mind does not need to sharpen every edge. Below all of it, the Atlantic continues as pure absence of light. You know it is there because the crossing has substance. You are not floating nowhere. There is a world beneath you, cold and immense and entirely out of sight. Yet, from within the Berth, that hidden ocean feels less like emptiness than foundation. Not seen, but crossed. Not approached, but steadily passed over. Another small Paris fragment rises and dissolves almost at once. The paper sleeve around a warm croissant, one corner of it crackling under your fingers. Then that, too, is gone before it becomes a scene. The Berth receives you back immediately. The throw over your legs, the sheet at your side, the low line of amber on the floor, the oval of sky. You remain aware of both scales at once now, the very near and the immeasurably far, the seam of the sheet near your wrist, the pressure of the pillow under one ear, the star field over the Atlantic, the hidden water below. It is a peculiar comfort, this combination of enclosure and distance. You are in a room no larger than your berth and the few feet around it. And at the same time, you are crossing one of the broadest stretches of night on Earth. So you let your eyes rest on the narrow window until even the stars begin to soften at their edges, not disappearing, only becoming easier not to count. The half shade, the aisle glow, the fitted bed beneath you, the engine hush at your back. All of it remains in balance. Outside, the sky extends over the Atlantic in cold clarity. Inside, your berth keeps its precise warmth and shape. Between those two conditions, you lie suspended, fully horizontal, while another invisible distance slips by below the aircraft and changes nothing except the depth of the night. Chapter 6. The crystal water glass, and the small rituals within reach. The glass is cool in your hand. Your fingers find the bowl by instinct on the ledge beside you, and the chilled weight of it tells you at once what the darkness does not need to explain. When you lift it, the cut edges press lightly against your skin. The first sip is colder than the air in the cabin, a clean line across your mouth and down your throat. After the bergamot and white tea folded into the warm towel earlier, after the wool soft heat of the socks, after the ivory topper giving back the warmth of your body, the water feels brighter by contrast, not bracing, not enough to wake you, only distinctly cold, a cool contrast to the warmth around you. It answers thirst at once, but it also marks the night differently. The towel had welcomed you in. You set the glass back down and hear almost nothing, only the faintest softened contact as crystal meets linen. In the near dark, the shapes beside you separate slowly. The pale square of the coaster, with its tiny silver wing pressed into one corner. The darker outline of the carafe a little farther back, placed where your elbow will not disturb it, where the throw cannot slide against it. The aisle glow, reduced now to a low thread along the floor, catches the lower facets of the glass and breaks into dim planes. Not bright exactly, only precise. Your hand rests for a moment on the ledge. The surface is smooth and cooler than the berth. The glass sits exactly where your fingers would go if you woke later without opening your eyes all the way. The coaster keeps it silent. The carafe stands close enough to find, far enough not to crowd the space. Beside the bed, everything has already been decided. The engine note continues behind everything, deep and even from the rear of the fuselage, a steady engine hum. When you first boarded, you noticed it as sound. Now it has become more like pressure at the edge of hearing, a velvety band that stays the same while your attention drifts over smaller things. Beneath it, if you listen, there is the finer hiss of air moving through the cabin, and the occasional, almost silent adjustment of fabric as your shoulder settles another fraction into the mattress topper. You draw your hand back under the charcoal throw. The cashmere has warmed where it crosses your middle and remains cooler at the edge near your wrist. Your heather gray socks make a faint passage against the sheet as you shift your feet an inch lower. The berth receives the movement without protest. Lying flat in the air still carries a trace of pleasant strangeness, though by now it feels less unusual than it did at first. Your spine has accepted the line of it. Your neck has stopped testing the pillow. Beside you, the carafe gives off a colder presence than the glass, though you do not need to touch it to know. You can imagine the chill held in its walls, the narrow neck, the stopper seated in place. It is enough simply to know it is there. The blanket edge had been turned down before you lay here. The shade had been left halfway, enough sky to glance at, without letting the window become a bright rectangle against the dark. The water waits where your arm can find it. Even the angle of the glass seems considered. You turn your face slightly toward the ledge again, though the objects are now mostly shapes. The glass has lost its brief amber definition and become part of the dark beside you. Only when the aircraft shifts through some minute change in angle, not a bump, not even a sway, only the ongoing steadiness of forward motion, does a thread of aisle glow find one facet and leave it. Then the glass disappears again into outline. Outside the half-lowered shade, the stars remain where they were, though you are no longer looking directly at them. It is enough to know that beyond the pane lies the Atlantic, black beneath a clear sky, and above that, the high, cold scatter of light. Inside, the measured world of the Berth continues on another scale entirely. Glass, linen, chilled water, the line of the throw over your legs. You think, briefly, of another glass tomorrow, or the next morning, set on a small table near hotel shutters on the left bank. Perhaps water there too, or coffee sending up a little heat into the pale room before the street below has fully filled. The image comes in fragments rather than sequence. Shutters opening outward over stone. The paper sleeve around a warm croissant making its dry crackle. A low diesel murmur from a delivery van turning somewhere below. Then even those pieces thin out, because this glass near your hand is more immediate than any future cup or plate or morning window. Your thumb brushes the edge of the throw. The fibers are fine enough that they move with almost no sound. Under your shoulder, the ivory topper has lost its first coolness entirely. It feels neither warm nor cold now, only settled, a surface that has adjusted to your weight and kept it. You notice how little effort remains in your body. The jaw is unfastened. Your hands no longer retain the impulse to do anything. Even your eyes, open or closed, seem to require nearly the same amount of attention. The carafe and glass continue to anchor the space in a practical way. They are not decorative now, though they are beautiful in the little that can still be seen of them. Their comfort is practical. You sense the attendant's final presence, not as memory of a person moving through the cabin, but as evidence in these completed placements. The turned blanket edge, the half-shaded window, the water at hand. After that, no further interruption. For a while, you listen again instead of looking. The rear fuselage hush remains constant. And because it remains constant, your thoughts no longer rise sharply from it. They drift out and fold back in, somewhere within the aircraft, far enough away not to disturb the privacy of this berth. A tiny settling sound comes and is gone. Perhaps glass against a secured shelf in the galley. Perhaps only the cabin answering its own motion. After that, the same even sound resumes without any seam in it. You reach once more for the water, not from need exactly, but because the coolness is pleasant. This time, you do it with less thought. Your hand finds the glass without searching. Your fingers know the shape now. The sip is smaller. The cold line down your throat is softer because you expect it. When you set it down again, the coaster receives it with that same nearly absent touch, and your hand returns to rest against the sheet before slipping back beneath the throw. Your breathing slows a little further. You notice it only because the throw rises less and falls less against your chest. The cabin air moves over the exposed back of your hand and then is gone again. So slight, it barely counts as touch. Nothing on the ledge requires your attention now. A final filament of floor-level glow catches in the glass once more, very briefly, then thins away as your eyes soften. The glass remains, but no longer as something to look at. It becomes part of the known map beside you, like the pillow under your head, or the folded line of the throw near your knees. Beyond it, the carafe keeps its chill. Beyond that, the wall curves inward. Beyond that, the night over the Atlantic continues. And then even the glass begins to recede. The rear fuselage hush comes forward. The fine breath of air through the cabin, the minute settling of fabric, the almost imperceptible answers of the aircraft to its own motion take over the space your eyes had been holding. What fills the berth now is sound. The deep, even note carrying you west to east. The soft, continuous atmosphere around it. The listening that will follow you into sleep. Chapter 7. Hearing the soft engine hush and the quiet air of the cabin, your hand remains near the edge of the throw for a moment after the glass has been set down. Your fingers still remember the cool glass. Far off, beyond the closed galley, another glass gives a single, delicate, settling sound. It is barely more than a touch, a faint contact after some tiny vibration of the aircraft has persuaded it a millimeter sideways. Then nothing follows. Even that small awareness begins to fade. You do not need to look at the ledge now. You know where everything is. The carafe is within reach. The coaster lies flat beneath the glass. The half-lowered shade keeps its narrow opening onto the night. The berth supports you from shoulder to heel without any part of you needing to adjust. So your attention shifts elsewhere. Not outward exactly. Not toward any object. It shifts into listening. From the rear of the fuselage comes a deep, refined hush. A continuous band of tone, smoothed until it feels almost plush against the ear. It does not rise or fall in any way that asks to be noticed. It simply remains, even and settled. You hear, too, the thinner sound braided over it, the air moving along the skin of the aircraft. Not loud, not sharp, only a faint rushing grain beyond the cabin wall, as though the night itself were passing in a long, unbroken stream. The sound has no edges. It does not suggest speed so much as passage, steady and uninterrupted. The Atlantic slipping beneath you in darkness. Over the broad engine note, now and then, the air outside seems to thin for an instant, then return to its prior texture. Not a change in course, not any event at all. Only the natural variation of movement at altitude. Too slight to matter, except that your listening has grown fine enough to notice it. The berth remains level beneath you. The ivory topper keeps its gentle firmness under your hips and along the length of your back. Your heather gray socks rest against the cooler place near the end of the sheets, and the charcoal throw lies with a light weight over your shins and knees. Then the cabin contributes its own smaller sounds. A low current of circulated air moves somewhere above and beyond you, almost too subtle to name. It is not a draft against the skin, only a tempered presence, a faint interior flow that keeps the air fresh and dry. If you listen for it directly, it disappears into the engines. If you stop trying, it returns as part of the whole. Below that, softer still, the upholstery and linen answer your stillness. Every so often, with your breathing, the sheet gives the smallest shift along the mattress topper. The throw settles a fraction closer at your side. A sleeve seam or pillow edge replies with a nearly inaudible hush of fabric against fabric. These are not interruptions. They belong to the night as fully as the stars beyond the shade. You lie still enough now to hear your place within the arrangement. A breath in, and the sheet draws lightly across one ankle. A breath out, and the pillow receives a little more of the weight beneath your head. Somewhere below the level of thought, the aircraft keeps doing what it has been doing all along, carrying you west to east, over black water you cannot see, toward a morning that remains far ahead and need not be approached by effort. When you are watching the window, there were points to rest on. One bright star, then another. The curve of the shade, the dim line of the ledge. When you were reaching for the glass, there was the coolness of crystal, the brief taste of chilled water. But sound does not arrive in separate pieces so easily. It extends. It repeats. It smooths the minutes into a longer surface. You find that your thoughts, which might once have stepped from one thing to the next, begin instead to drift in wider arcs, then shorten, then grow less necessary. You hear the breath leave you and enter again, not because it is loud, but because the cabin has become so spare. The breath is warmer at your lips than the air around you. It touches the pillowcase and disappears. After a while, even that small distinction softens. You listen again to the engines. At first, when a sound repeats, part of you may keep checking whether it will change. But eventually, the checking grows tired and falls away. The sound goes on by itself. You need not supervise it. The same surrender reaches your muscles by degrees. Your shoulders have already dropped into the mattress topper. Your calves no longer hold any trace of the day's walking. The space behind your knees has loosened. Even your feet, enclosed in those ribbed socks, seem to understand, before the rest of you does, that there will be no need to stand again for many hours. The berth has taken your length completely. You feel it under the back of the head, the line of the spine, the hips, the heels. A bed in the air is still a bed once you have stopped marveling at it. The sound outside the fuselage strokes past in one long, directionless stream. You could imagine, if you wanted, that this is what distance sounds like when all edges have been taken from it, not miles marked one by one, not the Atlantic charted below. It is a comforting thought, only because it is so impersonal. The aircraft goes on. The night goes on. The stars stay where they are. You are horizontal within that passage, and the only task left you is to hear it less and less as something external, and more as part of the condition of resting here. Then the cabin air, almost too fine to separate, keeps its tempered course above you. Then a small shift of linen near your ribs marks another breath. Then the pillow gives a little under your cheek. The repetition is not exact, but it is close enough that you notice one sound, then another, then the return of the first, and gradually the distinctions blur. The air moving above you seems to merge with the air moving outside. The fabric at your shoulder answers your breathing. The low aisle glow, though you are hardly looking at it now, remains somewhere beyond your closed or half-closed eyes as a dim orientation, not bright enough to define the cabin, only enough to keep it from disappearing entirely. And because of that, your mind begins to borrow the rhythm. A thought arrives, perhaps of the stars beyond the shade, perhaps of pale stone in Paris at first light, a shutter easing open onto a narrow street. But before it can gather much shape, the image thins. The thought loses its edges. What remains is not the window, not the street, not any future footstep, only the sense of being carried towards something that will unfold later without your help. The wind over the fuselage continues its fine, unbroken rush. You hear it less as wind now than as a high, delicate layer above the engines, almost like breath drawn across the rim of a distant glass. Then that comparison fades too, and it becomes only itself again. Movement over metal, night over aircraft, motion translated into a sound so constant that it ceases to demand interpretation. Your hand, still near the edge of the throw, slackens a little more. The fingers uncurl. The wrist grows heavier. The forearm settles more completely into the mattress beneath the sheet. Nothing dramatic changes. That is the comfort of it. The chapter of the night in which things are arranged and adjusted has passed. The water is poured. The blanket edge is already turned down. The shade is already set halfway. The glass has already made its one nearly silent contact with the coaster. Even that distant galley glass has settled now. What remains is the long middle of the crossing, where motion is constant and almost nothing else happens. You hear the rearward hush. You hear the airflow beyond the wall. You hear the tempered breath of the cabin. You hear the faintest response of linen each time your breathing changes the shape of you by a fraction. You hear your own breath entering and leaving. Then, after a while, you do not hear them separately at all. They gather into one atmosphere of sound, one continuous interior weather of the aircraft, tempered and sustained. The ear stops sorting. The mind stops naming. The berth beneath you, the throw over you, the dark outside the window, the hidden engines, the cooled air moving through the cabin. All of it begins to feel less like a set of parts and more like a single condition in which you are resting. If another small sound were to come, you would hear it, but none does. So the minutes continue in this lower register. The engine note deep and even, the airflow above and around the cabin, the nearly soundless settling of cloth, your breath entering and leaving, then the same again. At some point, you realize that you have not formed a full thought for a little while. There have only been beginnings. A star, a croissant sleeve crackling in some future morning, cool parquet in a museum room not yet filled with footsteps. But each image rises only briefly before it fades back down into the dark. The jet has become the only companion you need to register. Not as a machine exactly, but as a surrounding steadiness. The long-range hush at your back, the moving air beyond the wall, the climate-controlled breath of the cabin, the minute responses of fabric and cushion to your own stillness. The Atlantic remains below, unseen. The stars remain above the line of the shade. And here, within the berth, the night goes on in tone and texture rather than in events. Another breath, another faint shift of sheet at the ankle, another unbroken measure of engine hush. The aircraft crosses another invisible stretch of ocean, and nothing in the cabin needs to change for you to feel that distance passing. You listen. Then you listen less actively. Then the listening itself begins to blur, until the low note from the rear of the fuselage and the finer stream of air along the aircraft's skin seem to continue on their own, carrying your attention with them into a deeper, dimmer part of the night, where the sound no longer only surrounds you, but begins, softly, to open onto the first, fuller dream of Paris. Chapter 8. Thinking of a Paris hotel window opening at first light. Then the listening itself begins to blur, until the low, velvet note from the rear of the fuselage and the finer stream of air along the aircraft's skin seem to continue on their own, carrying your attention with them into a deeper, dimmer part of the night. From there, thought begins to loosen in a different way. The latch lifts. A Paris window, tall and narrow, painted shutters closed through the night, then giving outward at first light. You can feel the metal under your fingers, cool from the hours before dawn. One panel opens, then the other, with that measured swing shutters have when they are heavier than they look, The morning widens by increments. Air enters at once, cooler than the room, cool enough to touch the skin of your face, the backs of your hands, the bare strip of throat above a sheet. It carries stone, distance, and the first trace of coffee from somewhere below. Only after that do you notice where you are again. On the ivory topper, under the charcoal throw, with your feet in their ribbed gray socks and the half-shaded window beside you. The aisle glow remains low along the floor, too faint to shape much more than edges. The ledge beside the berth is a dark line you know by memory now. The glass, the coaster, the carafe, each in its place. The engines continue with the same softened note, so even and steady that it has stopped sounding like something produced and begun to feel more like a condition of the night itself, a constant under everything. You do not need to decide which street the window faces. Left bank is enough. Pale stone below, pale stone across the way, and a room still holding the last coolness of night. The early light has not yet become bright, only clear. It reaches the edges of furniture first. A sill, a curtain hem, the faint grain in a wooden floor. You stay where you are on the aircraft, and yet the thought opens a little farther. Then, before the image can sharpen too much, you notice the berth beneath you. The mattress topper has taken the shape of your shoulders and hips more completely now. The sheet has long since lost its first coolness. One knee rests at an easier angle than before, the throw lying over your shins with the light, dry weight of cashmere. The aircraft remains level in the dark, and the sound from the rear of the fuselage keeps its low grain uninterrupted. Outside the oval window, the Atlantic is still invisible except as depth. The opening in the shade frames only a narrow portion of sky, enough for stars and blackness, and, once in a while, a faint dusting farther out where the Milky Way thins and gathers. It is an odd comfort, this exact arrangement. The immense dark beyond the glass, and your own length laid flat beside it. One enclosed world beside another. And here you are, still in bed, though in another kind of room entirely. The jet's berth, once unusual in its flatness, now feels natural enough that the strangeness has nearly gone. The crossing is happening below thought, mile after mile beneath the fuselage, while your attention moves in these small circles. Dark cabin, narrow stars, cool Paris air, back to the pillow, back to the engines. Your breathing adjusts without instruction. A little deeper, then easier again. The cabin air moves in its low, conditioned current. You feel it most where the sheet meets the side of your wrist and at the edge of your face above the blanket line. The rest of you remains warm. Your socked feet have gone still. One shoulder settles a fraction deeper into the topper, and the pillow answers by giving just enough under your neck. The stars remain fixed only in appearance. The aircraft carries you under them so smoothly that change is almost impossible to catch in the act. A brighter point near the edge of the window shifts out of view. Another takes its place. The black beneath them keeps its own scale. Ocean and sky nearly indistinguishable, except for the stars. You become aware of your hand near the pillow, fingers uncurling and resting again against the sheet. The fabric is smooth under the pads of your fingers, with a faint coolness preserved where your hand has not been lying. The throw has shifted by less than an inch, enough to settle more closely along your side. Somewhere farther toward the galley, too distant to place exactly, a muted contact occurs. A small, single settling sound, and then the cabin returns to its uninterrupted hush. No one comes. Nothing needs adjusting. That knowledge remains in the room without needing to be thought about directly. The water is there if you want it. The shade remains halfway. The aisle light stays low. You do not have to check any of it. You know where each thing is in the dark. After the opening of those shutters, the berth feels more sheltered. The throw across your legs seems to hold its warmth with greater certainty. The pillow cups the side of your head. Even the dim boundary made by the half-lowered shade and the wall beside you feels deliberate. A quiet enclosure moving through the larger dark. You lie in the berth and think of the shutters opening. You imagine the shutters opening and feel the berth beneath your back. You hear, in one layer, the aircraft's low, continuous note, and in another, much fainter one, the suggestion of a street beginning below a Paris window. The imagined room brightens by degrees, not enough to become day in full, only enough for color to appear where before there was mostly tone. Cream or pale gray on the walls, weathered green or blue-gray paint on the shutters. A white cup somewhere not yet touched. You do not reach for it. You do not sit up. You only let the room continue becoming visible in that unhurried way European mornings sometimes do, when the light arrives first as shape and only later as warmth. Back in the jet, the stars remain cold and exact beyond the narrow opening in the shade. One faint band of the Milky Way appears for a moment, then thins as the angle changes. Yet the darkness outside has its own firmness. It is not dream material. It is altitude, ocean, clear sky, and the long route east. The pillow under your head is real. So is the slight coolness at your face where the cabin air moves. So is the remembered feeling air from the opened window, entering with enough force to be felt again for an instant on the skin. The berth supports you from shoulder to heel. All of it can exist together for a while in this drowsier part of the crossing. The cabin returns in full, though it has been present all along. The charcoal throw lies across your legs. The sheet rests smooth over your hips. Your socks are warm now under the blanket, no longer newly noticed. The side ledge is dark. The engines keep their velvet course through the night. Outside, the stars continue over the Atlantic, and beneath them, the ocean remains unseen, vast and black below the aircraft. You do not need to follow the Paris thought any farther yet. Enough that somewhere ahead there will be shutters and pale stone and cool morning air. For now, the mind touches that future lightly, then settles back into the Berth, which feels warmer for having imagined the chill beyond it. The night keeps moving east around you. Beyond the half-lowered shade, the narrow band of stars stays clear and remote above the dark water, as if holding a place open. Chapter 9. Warm croissants, coffee, and the quiet street below. For a while, you stay with the Berth and the narrow slice of night beyond the half-lowered shade, where the stars keep their distance, and the Atlantic remains only an idea of depth below them. The engines continue in their low rearward hush, so even and velvety that it is less a sound now than a condition of being here. Beneath your shoulder, the ivory topper has taken your shape more fully. The sheet has long since lost its first coolness. Your feet, in their ribbed gray socks, rest without pressure under the charcoal throw, and the whole small arrangement of the night has become familiar enough that you no longer need to check it. Then, without effort, another fragment of Paris begins to form. It does not arrive as a plan. You are not thinking ahead in any practical way. It is more like a sensation from the morning ahead. The dry, papery crackle of a sleeve folded around a croissant, still warm from the oven. The sound is small and exact. You can almost feel the give of the paper between your fingers, the way it resists for a moment, and then yields with that faint, crisp whisper of bakery paper creased open at the top. The image gathers a little more shape. You are not fully in it, not standing there in any complete scene, but you can sense the warmth through the paper first. It reaches your hands before anything else. The croissant is not hot enough to startle, only warm enough to announce itself. Through the sleeve, the outer shell feels delicate and structured at once. The laminated surface ready to scatter a few flakes if touched too firmly. For a moment, the engine note remains beneath it all. The fragrance comes next. Coffee first, though not in a heavy wave. Just the first thread of it. Dark, toasted, faintly bitter at the edges, rising into cool, early air. Then the pastry itself, butter and flour and warmth, with that unmistakable bakery scent that seems to contain both crispness and softness at once. In the Berth, your breathing stays slow, and for a few breaths, it feels as though the cool aircraft air has taken on some trace of that imagined morning aroma, though of course it is not. The cabin remains itself, tempered, dry, faintly mineral from chilled water and recirculated air. You can almost picture the street now, but only in pieces. A narrow roadway, still more gray than gold in the early light. Stone walls that have not yet warmed. shopfront glass carrying the pale reflection of morning. Somewhere below a hotel window, perhaps not far from where the shutters will open, a van passes slowly enough that its engine becomes a low diesel murmur rather than a disturbance. That low diesel tone stays at the edge of the image, never taking over. It is simply part of the hour. Deliveries being made before the city fills. Bread trays moved, crates set down. A side door opened and closed. Nothing hurried, nothing theatrical. You do not need to see the van clearly. It is enough to hear it from above, from behind a partly opened window, or perhaps from the threshold of a bakery where the first customers are still few. Back in the berth, one of your hands shifts slightly against the sheet, finding a cooler patch of linen and then settling there. The movement is small enough that the throw only adjusts by a fraction across your hip and thigh. The mattress beneath you gives almost imperceptibly and then steadies again. The engine hush does not change. Above it, the air along the fuselage keeps its faint, rushing grain, a texture more than emotion. The Paris fragment returns to the croissant. You can imagine lifting it from the paper sleeve and feeling how little it weighs for something so rich. The outside leaves a trace of butter on your fingertips. A few flakes break free and catch in the fold of the paper. The inside is warmer than the crust, tender and layered, each fold pulling apart with almost no effort. It is the kind of detail the mind likes to rest in when it is moving toward sleep. Not the whole breakfast, not a table laid out, not any conversation or destination. Only the exact sensation of a pastry warm enough to soften the coolness in your fingers. Coffee remains nearby in the thought, close enough to scent, but not yet to taste. Perhaps it sits in a white cup on a small saucer, dark at the center, a little steam rising and thinning in the air by the window. Perhaps it is carried in one hand while the paper sleeve is in the other. The image does not insist on one version. It changes shape as dreams do, keeping only what matters. Warmth in the hands, a bitter fragrance, the first food of morning, and the street below beginning its work in a low, unobtrusive register. Your eyes remain closed, or nearly closed, and the berth receives that imagined scene without losing its own reality. The fitted ivory topper still supports you from shoulder to heel. The pillow edge rests near your cheek. The sheet lies smooth over your calves, interrupted only by the soft rise of your feet beneath it. The charcoal throw carries a denser warmth over your middle, its cashmere surface almost weightless until you notice the faint pressure of it. The contrast between the bed in the air and the city street below does not sharpen you. It softens both. Another small crackle from the paper sleeve comes to mind. This time, it is even fainter, as if you are hearing it from farther inside sleep. A thumb presses lightly against the fold. The sleeve opens a little wider. The pastry shifts. That is all. Such a minor sound, and yet it is enough to bring with it the whole bakery hour. Ovens already cooling from the first batch. Counters brushed clean. A bell over a door perhaps not yet rung very often. The pavement outside still carrying the damp coolness that night leaves behind before sun reaches it. Then the image loosens again. The diesel murmur recedes down the street. The coffee fragrance thins. Pale stone remains for a moment, and the shape of a window above it. Then even that grows less distinct. The cabin returns in detail. You become aware again of the half-lowered shade and the narrow opening it leaves, of the dark beyond it, and the stars fixed there above the unseen ocean. The floor-level aisle glow is too faint to illuminate much now, but it is enough to suggest the edge of the ledge beside you, where the water glass and carafe remain in place. You do not need to reach for them. It is enough to know where they are. The engines continue as they have for hours, with that same deep, upholstered quality, as if the sound has been padded and smoothed before reaching you. When your thoughts drift toward the Paris street once more, the far diesel note under pale buildings and the aircraft's own sustained hush pass through one another. Not gates or roads or clocks, only the natural order of a morning assembling itself without your help. First shutters opening somewhere above the street, then coffee, then the warm paper sleeve, then the low work of deliveries below. It will all happen in its own time. You do not need to move toward it. The jet is already doing that. Your part is smaller now. To lie here while the miles pass beneath the aircraft in darkness. To let one image rise and then fade before the next one comes. You feel it instead in your body's lack of urgency. Your ankles are loose under the sheet. Your shoulders have given their weight more completely to the mattress. Even your jaw has softened enough that the space behind your tongue feels wider, easier. Morning is not something to arrange. It arrives by itself, whether over the Atlantic at altitude or on a Paris street where bakery paper creases in warm hands. For a few breaths, the imagined coffee comes nearer again. Not the first scent this time, but the cup itself near your mouth, carrying heat toward your face. The aroma is fuller here, roasted and dark, with a slight brightness at the edge. You need not drink it in the thought. It is enough to feel the warmth of the cup and know the taste it contains. Beside it, the croissant cools by degrees, though still not enough to lose that fresh-baked tenderness at the center. Outside, the street remains narrow. The delivery van farther off now, perhaps turning a corner, its low engine note briefly deepening between the stone walls before fading. It does not expand into a cafe, an itinerary, a face across the table. It remains only a few well-kept sensations, almost too slight to hold on to. They come the way the hotel shutters came before. Briefly, clearly enough to touch, then gone again. The berth is what remains. You feel the smooth, fitted sheet under your palm, the faint nap of the throw where it crosses your waist. the uninterrupted line of support beneath your knees and lower back. The coolness nearest the window is slight, more sensed than felt, and your socked feet stay warm under the bedding. Somewhere in the cabin, a panel gives a tiny, settling click and is still again. The air continues its low circulation. The stars beyond the shade do not seem to move, though the aircraft keeps carrying you steadily through the dark. One last time, the paper sleeve sounds in your thoughts. Just a brief, dry crease. No more than that. Then the deeper quiet of the cabin returns around it. Coffee becomes only a trace. The street below Paris fades to pale stone, and then to nothing visible at all. What remains is the even engine hush, the berth shaped to your length, the dark Atlantic somewhere beneath the fuselage, and the sense of morning still far enough ahead that you can let it go for now. Chapter 10. The quiet rooms of the Musée Rodin. Before the city wakes, cold light falls across the parquet first. It lies across the waxed floor in pale bars, turning the boards almost silver where the morning catches them, and leaving the seams between them a soft gray. The air has that faint museum scent. Polish, stone, old plaster not yet warmed by bodies. After the berth's tempered dark, it is cooler on the skin, cleaner in the lungs, a brightness that does not glow so much as settle. You lie still on the ivory topper, the charcoal throw drawn up over your legs, and the aircraft keeps its long, level course through the night. The engine note stays where it has been for hours, a low, velvet sound from behind you, so even and continuous that it no longer feels separate from the air moving through the cabin. Near the ledge, the water glass and carafe remain in their places. Beyond the half-lowered shade, a narrow band of black still shows. Somewhere below that window opening is the Atlantic, though at this hour it is only depth, only distance. And from that darkness, another Paris fragment forms. Not the street this time, not the first croissant. Something farther into morning, still early enough that the city has not yet gathered itself. You picture a gate, iron cooled by the hour before sunrise, pale gravel underfoot, the faint dampness that old garden walls keep before the day warms them. You do not arrive there in any hurried way. You are at the Musée Rodin just after opening. Once there, it becomes simply the museum. The first rooms, the pale walls, the floor beneath you. You feel the change at once from the imagined street outside to the interior air. Cooler, steadier, carrying a trace of stone and waxed wood. And that particular hush, made not by privacy, but by scale. Ceilings held aloft above you. Doorways aligned from room to room. Thick walls keeping the city at a distance. Not cold, only fresh. The parquet is one of the first things you notice. Not because it shines, though it does in places, but because of the way it receives light. boards laid in patient pattern, mellowed by years of souls passing over them. And yet, in this hour, almost ceremonially bare, you can imagine your own step there, measured without effort, the slight firmness underfoot, the old wood answering with the smallest possible sound. But in the image, even that does not happen yet. Your footsteps remain imagined. Back in the berth, one shoulder settles a fraction deeper into the mattress topper. The sheet has long since lost its first coolness. Your socks rest against the smoother fabric near your feet, and the throw lies with its familiar, faint weight over your shins. The cabin air moves lightly across your face. You do not need to open your eyes wider to see the room around you. You know where everything is now. The ledge, the glass, the dim aisle glow below, the curve of the window frame. The jet has become easy to picture, even in near dark, just as the museum forms easily from a few exact details. In the imagined gallery, daylight does not pour in. It arrives filtered, pale and even, spread across walls and floorboards without glare. Morning in the museum lifts everything into gray-white clarity. Here, edges do not soften so much as stand quietly apart from one another. A tall doorway opens into another room. The threshold is worn smooth at the center. Beyond it, in the cool light, a marble figure stands with one shoulder turned, the line of the neck catching brightness, while the face remains partly in shadow. The figure is not dramatic at this hour. It is simply there, waiting in the pale room with a stillness that deepens the doorway around it. Outside the museum, if you let the thought widen only a little, Paris is still in its early arrangement. Delivery vans have already passed on some streets and are still passing on others. A bakery door has opened and closed many times by now. Cups have been set onto saucers. Metal shutters have been lifted from shop fronts one by one. But from inside these rooms, those sounds barely enter. The city exists beyond thick walls and garden air, softened by distance. Morning is underway, but not yet crowded. The aircraft continues east. You feel it not as movement exactly, but as the unbroken support beneath you. The slight, continuous knowledge that you are horizontal in motion. That unusual comfort has become ordinary over the last hours. The berth fits you now without introduction. Your legs are long under the throw. Your neck rests in a line that no longer needs correction. In the gallery, sculpture stands in cool light with air around it. Bronze, dark against pale walls. Marble carrying morning differently, absorbing shadow into its contours. Benches wait along the walls. Openings frame the next chamber. The hush belongs to a place designed for footsteps, voices, pauses, and looking, now held briefly before all that begins. The crossing, the berth, the half-shaded window, the cool rooms in Paris. None of them oppose one another. They belong to the same long stretch of lowered pulse, though each keeps its own texture. A faint sound passes through the cabin. Not interruption, only the low current of circulated air changing tone for a moment and settling again. The crystal glass beside you catches no light now that you can see, but you know its shape from earlier. The cool rim, the linen coaster under it, with a small silver wing pressed into the weave. That prepared arrangement remains untouched, and the knowledge of it is enough. Your hand does not need to reach. In the museum image, a window somewhere farther down the corridor brightens on the garden side. The light there is stronger, turning the floor just beneath it a silvery shade, while the center of the room stays more muted. The boards show tiny shifts of tone from plank to plank. Honey gone pale with age, walnut deepened by polish, seams darkened slightly where dust once settled and was lifted away. You notice these things because the building gives you room to notice them. Nothing presses from behind. Nothing gathers at your shoulder. You could stand before one work for several minutes and then move on without thinking of duration at all. You could turn a little and look through two rooms at once, one opening into the next, each with the same cool air and waxed wood and measured light. The morning outside would continue on its own. Somewhere, coffee would still be poured. Somewhere, a paper sleeve would crackle around the last warm pastry. Somewhere, a van would idle briefly at a curb before moving off. Yet inside, the pace would remain unchanged. A corridor, a turn, another room. The slight give of old wood under a sole not yet placed there. Light angled across a threshold. The faint suggestion of garden beyond a window. Green held back by glass. The jet keeps moving through the night above the unseen water. Stars remain beyond the shade, though you are no longer looking directly at them. The aisle glow stays low near the floor, enough to shape the edge of cabinetry, and then fade. Linen shifts once near your ankle as the throw settles more closely along your foot. After that, everything is still again. In the imagined museum, the first real footsteps of the day have not yet reached your room. Perhaps they are somewhere near the entrance, softened by distance, too faint to separate from the building itself. Perhaps they have not begun. Either way, the parquet before you remains clear. The air between one sculpture and the next remains open. Morning light continues to gather by degrees, cool and patient, leaving the corners visible but subdued. It is only this early hour before voices collect in stairwells and doorways, before the rhythm of seeing becomes communal. You had imagined arrival first as shutters opening, then as coffee and warm pastry, and now as cool rooms and pale floors. And then even that begins to loosen. The doorway remains for a moment, and the white shoulder of the marble figure within it. Then the edges blur. The parquet keeps its pale pattern a little longer, then softens into tone rather than board and seam. The walls hold their cool brightness, then recede. The room does not vanish all at once. It thins and gives way to what has been beneath it all along. the berth under your body, the familiar line of your legs under the throw, the engine hush accompanying every thought tonight, and outlasting all of them. You are here again, fully, though not sharply. The ivory beneath your shoulder and hip, the half-lowered shade, the dark Atlantic somewhere far below, unchanged by your attention. Ahead, Paris remains only as an impression of pale wood and cool stone. The aircraft goes on carrying you toward it, steadily. Chapter 11. Returning to the berth as the cabin becomes almost weightless. The charcoal throw has shifted by fractions as the hours have passed. At some point, without your noticing the moment, its edge has come to lie a little closer along one side of you. Not tucked, not fixed, only settled. The cashmere has that faint weight that is less a pressure than a definition, enough to tell your body where the warmth is gathered. Along your shin, over your hip, near the curve of your shoulder, it rests in a continuous line. Beneath it, the berth feels so level, so evenly given over to your weight. The thought of Paris thins quickly now. The berth beneath you has become more immediate than any morning image. Pale stone, unopened shutters, bakery paper around a croissant. Each drifts back into the distance of thought, while what remains nearest is the line of your own body resting in the dark. You notice again the exactness of the bed made in the air. The ivory topper has long since lost its first faint chill, and now meets you with a tempered neutrality, neither warm nor cool, simply shaped to your weight from shoulder to heel. Beneath the sheet, your legs lie straight without effort. Your feet, in their ribbed gray socks, rest where they have come to rest, no longer aware of shoes, flooring, aisles, or standing. The socks feel dry and even against your skin, softer where the blanket passes over them. You make no real adjustment, only the smallest yielding into what is already there. A heel eases farther down. One shoulder unlearns a bit more of its daytime habit of lifting. The back of your neck gives itself more fully to the pillow. That is all. The berth receives these tiny changes so completely that they barely register as movement. The mattress answers with a nearly imperceptible settling, and then the shape of you is simply part of the arrangement again. The engine note continues behind everything else, deep in the rear of the fuselage, softened until it no longer resembles effort. It is not a sound you follow from beginning to end. It has no edge to catch on. Instead, it fills the background of the cabin, the way dimness fills the upper corners, constant and even, with a velvety grain that seems to pass not only around you, but through you, smoothing thought as much as it smooths silence. Above or around it, the finer textures of the night remain. The faint rush of air along the aircraft skin, the low current from the vents, a slight dry coolness touching the bridge of your nose when you breathe in. Somewhere near your feet, the sheet gives the smallest answer as it settles flatter. The sound is so slight, you feel it almost as much as hear it. A papery hush against the steadier wool of the throw. Then nothing changes again for a while. The aisle glow remains low along the floor, too dim to illuminate much, but enough to keep the nearest edges of the cabin from disappearing entirely. It catches a narrow seam before fading out. Beyond that, the berth and the rest of the cabin are known more by memory than by sight. You know where the water glass is without turning toward it. You know the carafe is beside it. You do not need to verify any of it. The knowledge itself is part of the comfort now, folded into the dark with the same completeness as the blanket edge and the half-lowered shade. At the window, the opening left by the shade is narrower than the whole sky and more than enough. Through it, the night remains clear. The Atlantic below is invisible except as depth. A dark so complete it has no surface. Above that unseen distance, stars remain fixed in their own arrangement while the aircraft moves under them. You no longer try to separate one brightness from another. A few points sharpen when your eyes rest there. Others blur and return. Once, a faint, pale dusting suggests the Milky Way again, thinned almost to nothing, then easier to sense than to see. The curious thing, this far into the crossing, is how little difference there seems to be between looking outward and closing your eyes. The stars leave a trace behind your lids. The darkness beyond the glass and the darkness within the cabin begin to share the same texture. Even the motion of the aircraft becomes hard to place. You know you are moving quickly, steadily, high above the Atlantic. But what reaches you is not speed. It is only continuity, the unbroken engine hush, the level support under your back, the stable pressure of the throw over your legs. The hush has become almost bodily, as if your breathing has taken its measure from it. Your thoughts move more slowly now, and when they come, they arrive without much insistence. Paris returns for a moment, but only in pieces too small to gather into a plan. A shutter opening on its hinges, pale stone receiving the first cool light, coffee poured somewhere below street level, its fragrance rising before the cup is seen. Then the image loses detail, as if it has been set down at a polite distance. You do not need to follow it. The place where the sheet lies flat across your thighs, the slight warmth collected at the bend of your knees, the way the wool of the socks holds a little more heat at the toes than at the ankles. You find yourself resting in them, the way you might rest in a familiar room at home. Not because they are remarkable, but because they require no interpretation. The air in the cabin has changed by almost nothing over the last hour. Yet you notice one minor shift. The coolness at your hands has softened. Perhaps your fingers have drawn farther under the throw, or perhaps your skin has simply matched the temperature around it. Either way, the difference is slight and pleasant. Your hands are not doing anything now. They lie where they have fallen, one nearer your side, the other resting more loosely. And the stillness of them seems to tell the rest of you that no further arrangement is needed. The aircraft continues in the same invisible line. The stars remain where they are. The berth keeps its level plane under you. A tiny crease near your ankle eases out of the sheet. The blanket edge settles closer again, this time over your forearm. Not by a noticeable movement, but by a gradual finding of place, as though the fabric has finally stopped carrying the memory of your last shift and has accepted the one before that. If Paris appears again, it does so in a quieter register than before. Not shutters this time, nor bakery paper, nor even the museum's cool rooms in their full outline. Only a suggestion of parquet under morning light, pale and matte, before footsteps have crossed it. A room with enough space in it for your gaze to travel without choosing an object. Then that too dissolves, and the dark of the cabin returns, with no sense of leaving one place for another. You become aware, for a moment, of the entire length of yourself at once. The crown of your head on the pillow, the back of your shoulders broad against the topper, the easy weight of your arms, the long line through your hips and thighs, the wool at your calves and feet. It is not a scan so much as a single impression, an understanding that you are fully supported from one end to the other. In ordinary travel, there are always angles to negotiate. A knee bent too long, a neck waiting for a better position, a foot searching for room. Here, there is none of that. You are horizontal in motion, and it feels correct. The engine hush goes on. Now, the details do not disappear exactly. They soften into one another. Warmth, gleam, low light, depth beyond the glass. The idea of stone and morning. Each loses its boundary and enters the same dim current. The half-shaded window keeps its small portion of sky. One star seems brighter for a few breaths, then no brighter than the others. The faint rush over the fuselage continues, a finer thread laid over the deeper engine tone. The cabin air moves in its low cycle. The throw rests over your chest and along your side with that same measured weight. Under the sheet, your feet remain still. The socks warm now all the way through. You might think for an instant of the hour on the ground below somewhere, but the thought does not develop. There is only the sense of farther night, and within it, this small, exact berth, made flat and kept in order, moving east without asking to be noticed. Your breathing has become one of the cabin sounds. You hear it now and then, not as effort, but as a soft exchange of temperature. Cooler air in, slightly warmer air out. The pillow keeps the same shape under your head. The blanket edge remains close at your forearm and shoulder. Nothing needs to be corrected. Even the distinction between your own stillness and the aircraft's motion has begun to blur. Another image of Paris almost forms. Perhaps the narrow street with its first vans. Perhaps the hotel room before the shutters open. But it does not come fully into focus. A pale wall, maybe, or the sense of light waiting behind wood. And then even that fails to gather. What remains is not disappointment, only less to follow. So you return again, without effort, to the immediate field of the berth. Ivory beneath you, charcoal over you, gray wool at your feet, dark window beside you, stars beyond, Atlantic below unseen, engines behind and around, carrying on in the same low register. The cabin is reduced to its dim outlines, the ledge, the shade, the walls, the floor-level glow, enough to keep this one small room intact. And within that room, you grow stiller by degrees, until even the thought of becoming stiller loses its shape. A level dark, a measured warmth, a hush with stars faintly held behind the eyes. After a while, even those words begin to thin. Chapter 12. Drifting above the Atlantic, while Paris waits beyond the night, and within that room, you grow stiller by degrees, until even the thought of becoming stiller loses its shape. The berth remains level beneath you, the ivory topper fitted smooth under the sheet, the charcoal throw resting in its familiar line across your legs and hips. The half-lowered shade still leaves its narrow opening. The glass and carafe remain on the ledge, exactly where your hand would find them if you reached. The engines continue in their refined rearward hush, that velvet note with the faint grain of air moving over the fuselage. You lie fully horizontal, and even that has nearly ceased to seem unusual. Earlier, it had its own mild astonishment. A real bed in the air, a room made out of a divan, a private crossing arranged down to the turned edge of the blanket. But the body grows used to comfort with surprising speed. Your shoulder has its place. The back of one calf rests more heavily into the mattress than the other. Your heels are warm in the ribbed gray socks. The pillow meets the angle of your head so evenly that you no longer think of it. Beyond the window, the Atlantic is still only darkness below darkness, unseen except as a depth your mind supplies. Above it, stars remain in the narrow cut of sky. A few shine with enough steadiness to seem fixed in the glass itself, until the smallest shift of your breathing changes the angle, and they separate again into distance. Once, faintly, a pale concentration of light gathers farther out, not bright enough to interrupt the night, only enough to suggest the Milky Way as a sifted band across the upper dark. Then it thins again, and the view returns to a sparse scattering. The sound has become less like hearing and more like being accompanied by a texture. The engine note does not rise or fall in any meaningful way. It stays where it has stayed for hours, broad and even, with just enough depth to smooth the edges of thought. Beneath it is the lighter rush along the skin of the jet, and under that, almost too faint to name, the movement of circulated air from the vent. Once, somewhere beyond your little room of sheet and throw and dim ledge, a tiny settling sound touches the cabin. a single glass or latch finding rest. And then the aircraft returns to its established pattern, unchanged. Your hand does not move toward the water. It is enough to know the cut crystal is there, cool and faceted in the dark, standing on the linen coaster with its small silver wing pressed into the weave. Earlier, the glass caught amber light. Now it belongs mostly to touch and memory. If you pictured it, you would picture the rim first, then the cold weight of it, then the coaster muffling its return to the wood. But you do not need to picture it for long. Your feet settle a fraction deeper under the throw. The fabric at your ankles has the dry, faintly brushed feel it has had all night, and the sheet below your calves has cooled again in places where air reaches it. The ivory topper has long since taken your outline without sagging. It gives back a measured support through the shoulder blades, the small of your back, the backs of your thighs. A shutter, pale stone, the first thin coolness of air. The image stays only a moment before the berth receives you back. Your cheek remains on the pillow. The aircraft keeps its line over the Atlantic. The stars beyond the shade do not alter. Your breathing has slowed enough that the pauses between one exhale and the next seem wider. Not empty, simply wider. In those pauses, the cabin's small details drift farther apart from one another. The ledge, the window, the aisle glow low to the floor beyond your berth, the seam of the sheet near your wrist, the hidden contour of the wall beside you. Each one appears, then recedes, with more space around it than before. You do not stay there either. The image is too light to hold, and there is no need to hold it. It passes through, leaving only a trace of coolness before the berth fills in again around you. Pillow at the side of your face, sheet smooth under your forearm, socks warm, engines steady. Nothing in the berth needs adjusting. The blanket edge, turned down hours ago and later drawn closer, remains in place. The sidewall is dark. The floor-level glow still traces the aisle in a line so low and dim it barely reaches you. The air from the vent touches your forehead and the back of your hand with the same dry coolness as before. Somewhere beneath all of that, beneath the fabric and the ledge and the engineered hush, is motion constant enough to disappear. Your body understands this better than thought does. There is no bracing in the feet, no held line in the jaw, no need to orient yourself toward the next thing. Your weight is distributed and accepted. If you notice your chest at all, it is only as the rise and fall under the sheet and throw, small and regular. Your shoulders have widened into the bed. Your hands are uncurled. One knee rests in its easier angle. The back of your neck gives itself over to the pillow without correction. You're not arranging yourself anymore. The arrangement has already been made. Outside, the stars remain. They do not brighten. They do not dim. They simply continue in their distance, while the aircraft moves beneath them, and the half-lowered shade keeps the view narrow enough that the sky feels companionable rather than immense. The Atlantic below stays invisible, but you know it is there in the same way you know the water glass is on the ledge. Not by looking directly, but by the stable presence of what has been set in place around you. A shutter, then the pillow again, the sheet, the throw over your shins, the low current of air, the narrow stars. The crossing goes on whether or not you attend to it. The cabin remains near dark and exact. Paris stays ahead somewhere beyond the black water and the high night. But at this distance, it is made only of small morning impressions, each one already softened by the fact that you do not need them yet. They can remain where they are, pale and unhurried, while you rest here in motion. Your thoughts do not so much stop as loosen their sequence. A fragment of stone facade, the cool rim of the water glass, remembered but untouched, the faint brushed feel of the socks at your heels, a star fixed for a breath in the window, the broad, velvety note from the rear of the fuselage, all of it drifting nearer together, then farther apart, without requiring order. And still, the aircraft moves on. Far below, the ocean remains unseen. Far ahead, morning remains only an idea. Between them, you are carried in a room no larger than a berth, with stars cut into view by the lowered shade and the engines sounding from behind like a constant, padded current. For now, those things are light enough to drift. You stay where you are, level and covered, your breathing regular, your hands at rest, your feet warm at the end of the bed. The sheet lies flat along your legs. The throw keeps its low weight. The aisle glow remains faint. The stars continue in their narrow portion of sky, and the engines go on, smooth and low.